Okay, before we start, I just want to say some really good work this week, some really good progress, some elements that are coming in that is really making your work look better, some good style issues that have improved, and I think you're beginning to think about how a bulletin should be made up. Still, various aspects that we're a bit of a long way off, which it lets the package down because there isn't enough substance in them, there isn't enough storytelling in them, but at the moment, as it stands, certainly the progressive line is definitely on the upward curve. Here we go then.
Welcome to Winchester News Online. I'm Johnny Leck, and here are the latest headlines. Prison conditions cause for concern. Rangers rally to stop crime. And pass the popcorn for Winchester Film Festival.
Okay, I think that's quite a bright start. Look, but the cause for concern when I looked at this for the first time about the prisons is pictures. We'll come back to that in a minute, but it's a good headline. The Rangers rally, I just wonder if, I know there's a shot in your package, Joseph, where you're walking together towards the camera. Maybe that is a better one, or you've done it because the logo and the branding on the back of him. Okay, I understand that, but it's something you need to think about, part of the debate about which picture you will use during your headlines. And the film festival, I've looked at it again, and actually it does look stylized and look like a film. I just wonder whether it's the right shot. I know it looks nice, but when you see it the first time, you're just not quite sure what that piece of ice is. Even though you said film festival, it's a little bit jarring, that's all. So just think consciously about what you're trying to put into your headline shots. Okay.
Our top story. Her Majesty's Prison in Winchester has failed to meet the required living standards for its inmates, according to an annual report made by its independent regulators. Sam Delamore reports.
It's a very strong opening line, which is very good, but I think it needs a subsequent line. As I've said in all our links, we don't want just one line, Sam Delamore reports, whatever it is. We then go on to about Rangers, and then is it just one line, and then our reporter. So we need to add an extra line. Remember, we're trying to probably get 2, maybe 3 short sentences in there to explain what is going to happen in this story.
HM Prison Winchester is still failing, according to a yearly report by the IMB.
I think, having said HM Prison previously, I think we can just say Winchester Prison.
Conditions being described as squalid.
Conditions described as, just cut out the being, don't need that. But what we do have an issue with, and you'll understand this, Sam, you're thinking when you do this story, it's a good report, it's on paper, but how on earth do we make pictures out of this, and how do we make a TV package? Because all we're going to get is GVs of a prison. I mean, if ever there was a guilty building, this is it. But we've never had access inside the prison. So automatically you're doing this package with your hands tied behind your back.
The Independent Monitoring Board is an organisation run by volunteers, and their role is to monitor the day-to-day life in their local prison to ensure that certain standards are met.
Very good explanation of what they are. And so you've explained the story there.
Report we recognised when we published it in September. This
was really important. And now we have that consistency. It looks so much better. So much better there is a connectivity between our whole bulletin and a style, and that's important.
Is highly critical of Winchester Prison. The prison is an old prison. It's not built as we would build one today by any stretch of imagination. It is overcrowded, and the conditions in which the men are kept are unsatisfactory. We describe the prison as squalid in some areas. Now, that is not to say that we do not recognise the hard work of the staff, but what we are saying is that the system should be generating the right outcomes for the men both inside prison and, even more importantly, when they leave and return to society.
The report also mentions the issue of understaffing, and a prison service spokesperson told Winol, "We know Winchester is facing real challenges."
Just a little bit on this. What you need to make sure, Sam, is if I just go back to your bit here, look, sound, and it affects quite a few people actually, that we need to have natural sound underneath your pictures, all your GVs, and sometimes it's missing or it's a little bit low, and I'm sure it gets lost in the compression, but it still needs to be there to add a sense of feel to go with the pictures. And also when you mix from, what you need to do is to have a dissolve rather than a cut to black. When you go from the street scene to your graphic. Otherwise, it looks like there's a black hole. So you need to mix it somehow or choose a different color as your background. Otherwise, it looks like there's a gap in the edit. You'll see what I mean when you look through it next time.
And even more importantly, when they leave and return to society.
The report also mentions the issue of understaffing and
See, it was very quiet, and look, and then we've gone to black before we see the graphic.
Prison service spokesperson told Winol.
So I would just have something, if you can have a picture of the prison, a GV, a still of the prison, just compressed back into this area here, rather than up against black, because that's very dull. If you know how to do it, put it in. If you don't know, then ask someone. And just to make this a little bit more lively as a graphic, because graphics aren't that exciting, but we can do plenty with them to make them more exciting.
We know Winchester is facing real challenges. That is why we put the prison into special measures. That means we are providing bespoke support for the leadership team and have recruited 80 new officers over the past year.
I think also at the bottom of that, just have the source of that quote. I know you mentioned it going into it, but just have where that came from and maybe a date or, you know, just a month, whatever it might be.
Well underway, HMP Winchester and the INB are working together to improve the living conditions inside the prison and to improve the way of life for inmates for when they leave. Sam Delamore, Winchester News Online.
Just slow it down a little bit, Sam. Otherwise, it's a good, confident piece to camera. Well done. You're sort of situated in the right place. I'm sure you're aware that you didn't want to go over the other side of the road, over here to where the gate is. Otherwise, you felt you might be trespassing, and that's an important point because they would definitely turf you off that piece of land. And it's what the package misses really is, as we've said, pictures inside and a little bit more information. A little bit. We need the visual to add to the story. We need the information to add to the story, and obviously, the Home Office is only there in a sort of graphic capacity, but it's important that you have spoken to them to get the other side of the story. So there is balance there. You've got a very good interview beforehand and you've got a piece to camera. So while you've tried to construct it really well, what you will understand clearly is that there is a lot missing from this story, and it's often very difficult, however strong a story might be, to make it your lead if there are no pictures. And that is something, that's a debate you've got to have. And when you're news editor, you should be looking at the stories that go out. You will look at the packages before they are broadcast and look at it and make that decision and go, can I really justify that being my lead story when we haven't really got any pictures? Now, at this case, I'm not sure. And I think it's, the first two stories actually link in. Maybe the Rangers is a better story because we've got better access, they're better pictures, and it actually drives your bulletin, and this is a little bit drier. So that's the sort of debate you have to have as a news editor. Let's move on to the Rangers and Joseph's story.
Now, with the Home Secretary calling for more police, for the first time Winchester have put Rangers on the city streets to tackle low-level crime. Our reporter, Joseph Lyons, has more.
And maybe, I think you've linked it in nicely, and it's written pretty nicely. Again, do we need to, in our link, explain what Rangers or who Rangers are? I know it's explained in the package, but whether this really should come in the link so that we understand what on earth is going on here.
We now have Rangers walking the beat in Winchester to fight crime.
Again, this appears, I know there's not much sound here, Joseph, but it sounds to me this is mute. it needs sound from the streets.
But why now?
The, I suppose, budget constraints that Hampshire Constabulary are experiencing, as are police forces nationally. We're looking at an additional resource to support frontline services.
We have very similar powers to PCSOs.
Framing of that one?
We'll be able to deal with beggars, we'll be able to take name and addresses, which will help us get on top of case.
Okay, so look at our rule of thirds. That's probably okay, just about okay that way, but he's very much the wrong side of frame and would be better off if he were positioned here, and then you have him looking out there at camera left.
With people. We have our body-worn footage as well, which really helps identify, people. We can build up evidence to help the police like that as well.
And what he has actually done is something that you could have done in your voiceover, because he's actually explained what his role is and what powers he has. But that could have been done in a simple bit of voiceover, and then you can use another bit. You can use the bit about his body armour and how he is prepared and what he has got to use to help the police. So think of it that way, that you can often say something better than somebody in an interview because you've got the time to construct it afterwards, rather than being a little bit lazy and getting them to describe it for you.
Replacing anybody is an additional resource, and we've collaborated closely with the police and Winchester City.
Again, that needs a little bit of sound, natural sound underneath this, just bled gently into it.
So, head of community safety team over the last 6 months bringing this together so that we can work together and share information to make it safer in Winchester.
Rather than just straight up accusing him or...
That's a little bit of a strange edit as well. Why did it, you've sort of dropped it underneath her, but then you hear this other voice. So that's a little bit strange. You need to make that a hard edit, really, so that he comes in talking afterwards. But this is a really nice technique. You've got really good access with this guy, and because of that, I wonder whether you should have probably started with him and you walking the streets with him and him getting this voice into it straight away. I think that may have been the story and the way you should have started, even though you've started together, but it's the reverse, and I think the reverse shot, and I think you two together coming forward would have been a great, and him talking, been a great opening shot.
Arguing with him, you sort of tiptoe around it for a while.
Now, here's another technique. He's walked out of shot, so that is great. Rather than have this rather ugly pan round to find him again, you could keep the sound running and then pick up the picture.
Talk to him. How's your day? What's up? Why are you feeling so...
There. All right, and because we don't see his mouth move, nor yours, Joe, what we can do is actually cut out that ugly pan and now use these pictures, because there's no lip sync issue because we can't see you from the front.
They're like, why are you being like this, level with me. And they appreciate the respect in that way, and then you can actually progress somewhere with it.
So we could have actually taken out that, if you see what I mean, you could take it out that second where there's a bit of an ugly pan and picking you up.
This is just another presence. I mean, obviously, if we could have a higher police presence in Winchester, that would be fantastic, but that's not the case. So,
Alex charged that.
Right. Again, you're editing there. That's not the case. Bang, straight out, because she says so, and then you leave her there for a bit, and then you come to the Hampshire Constabulary. So that needs to be tighter. So your editing technique needs to be tighter. But what I really like about this piece is the speed of it, the use of lots of different voices. And by using that, it keeps the pace of this report going, and it keeps you interested all the way through. So for that, it's really, really good. It doesn't dwell too long on anything. The interviewees are not too long. The grabs from them are not too long. So the pace of this story is really, really good, Joseph.
Hampshire Police Federation Chair told us, chief officers are under more pressure than ever and have to make difficult decisions because the share of money that is given to Hampshire Constabulary in the funding formula.
Just two things. Now, is it formula? A, look, there's no R there. Okay, so it's not formula. This says formulae, which is plural. So is it formula? It certainly should have an R. And if it's formula and there's no E, or formulae, or formulae, some people say, then that would be how you pronounce it, if it's plural.
Isn't fair. This means residents of Hampshire suffer. The police officers I represent want to do a good job, but because of budget constraints, it has become more and more difficult to provide the level of service they would want to give. It has disappointingly forced the private sector into looking for ways to look after its residents, like Winchester Bid.
Now, that is actually the first time you've really explained that it's a private security service. Now, that is where it could have gone into the link so that you perfectly understand what this story is about, because we had a little bit where he said what the Ranger himself said, what powers he had, but it didn't say why he was there, who's paying him, who set up this. So that was missing earlier on in the story.
The cuts of the police force in Hampshire, they've had to make a decision to have less of a street presence, which in turn has forced the local community to take responsibility of their own safety. But with less powers than the police, will the Rangers be a sufficient replacement for the people of Hampshire? Only time will tell.
It's a really good piece of the camera because you've weighed up the argument. One of my bugbears is only time will tell, because honestly on sort of 90% of stories you could say that. So try and keep that out. But apart from that, I think, visually it's a really strong piece of camera. Joseph, you're always very good in front of camera. It's really, really nicely framed, this. With the police car there, it makes so much sense. It's really good. It's nice. It's, as I say, it's nicely lit as well. I mean, that's just because you balanced it right. That all works really, really well. So from that point of view, very well done, but leave out that line. But when you look at it as a whole, there's an awful lot going on in this story. And you've used lots of different techniques, all of which are really good to carry this package through. Just, I would say, work on your editing, because it's a little bit shoddy in places. A couple of techniques that you could use. But the idea and what you have done is great. I actually think you could have a little bit more of the Ranger, because you've got really good access to him, and he would carry the story for you.
Joseph Lyons, Winchester News Online.
Now, trying to park your car at home after a long day can sometimes be a frustrating task. This could be made even more challenging due to a change in the council's residential parking scheme. Our reporter, Emily Wilson, has more.
That is a great link. That works. Slightly soft opening, and then a news line. Excellent. And natural sound at the start of a story. Well done.
Winchester's residents face an increase in charges to park outside their homes due to a rise in annual fees. People are concerned that paying will not always result in a space.
I live in North Winchester. Quite often you get back after a day's work and you can't park around your house, so you have to drive around the town, adding to the pollution that's going on in the city.
Civic chiefs say that the residential parking scheme, which...
Nice. Smart. Keeping it moving. Short grab. Really good. Bit of energy in this piece. Nice technique with a bit of a pull focus. Good so far.
People to park close to their home is costly to maintain, so a minimum fee is being introduced. In some areas, the charges are being increased by 246%.
From my point of view,
I think, one thing about this story that I felt it needed a graphic somewhere to explain really the figures of what it's going up from and to. This is a good grab. Martin Todd, a friend of ours, friend of the station.
if you're charging a flat rate and you're not taking into account people's ability to pay, the size of the vehicle, the type of the vehicle, how polluting the vehicle is, then that's a kind of poll tax on parking, and we need something that's a bit fairer.
But for those who live outside of the city, parking in the centre is already very expensive, with some people paying up to £2,760 a year.
I think we need to decrease car parking charges and try and get as much people into the community, into the town centres to be shopping and, keeping the community alive.
The council
Just be careful here on your story, because what you've done is you've started by talking about parking permits at home being increased. You've then moved the argument to it being very expensive in the city to park. And this is obviously why you're staying there. But you've got they're two very different stories here. So which one are you really trying to tell?
That residents who currently don't have to pay to park their car in certain zones will need to start doing so, and those who pay £22 will now need to pay £50. If the scheme continues, the charges will come into effect in April. Drivers will now need to start considering where they can afford to park their car. I'm Emily Wilson, reporting for Winchester News Online.
Emily, you've done it's a really good piece to camera there, and you've obviously thought about where you're going to do it. Just say, Emily Wilson, Winchester News Online. Don't bother with the I am. Okay, again, so we're talking about when we're having our Astons of who we're interviewing, we want consistency throughout the bulletin. So we want it in the SOQ as well. Otherwise, it's a good story and there are lots of elements in it and you should be praised for that. I would say you want to make sure there is clarity in what you are trying to tell us. So there's a slight blurring of the edges because I think there are two stories you've tried to combine in one. Or if this is one story, then you really need to explain how the thread goes through those two elements. And I think it's crying out for graphics because you tell us in the piece to camera as the very last thing that actually it's going up from 22 to £50, and we don't know that beforehand. Yes, you say 246% or whatever you said, but that doesn't really put it into context. So I think it was just crying out for a graphic at some stage. Otherwise, some really good elements in there.
Well, we are potentially just hours away from a Brexit agreement, and there are still deep divisions. The cabinet seems to be split, and perhaps the local government is too. Renee Shaw is in the newsroom, giving us the latest on the local situation.
See, that's a link. That's a link that explains where we're going and what we're going to do. I, as a viewer, am absolutely certain I know what is going to happen now and what this debate is about. And if you want to reflect it locally, then this is a good way to do it.
Thanks, Johnny. So after Theresa May's talks today, it has become clear that we are dangerously close to a no-deal Brexit. Now, the UK is essentially playing a waiting game, and there is a substantial lack of clarity around the Brexit situation.
It's a really strong start, Renee. This is the most difficult thing to do. A, you're doing it live. B, you don't have an auto cue. You're coming up with your own words, your own ideas to link it in to what some of the MPs are saying. So while you may look at it and go, oh my goodness, I stumbled on a few bits here and I may have repeated myself places, actually what you've done is massively difficult and perhaps one of the most difficult parts of telly. And this debrief you should look at and think, actually, it's a massive positive of what you have done here. I, who have been in telly for 30 years, still am learning all the time how to talk to a camera and explain facts clearly so that a viewer understands it. And you've got the complex issues here of trying to bring in all the thoughts of the MPs. Now, what is probably my advice is at an early stage in your career, keep it as simple as possible. Because when you start going down various avenues, you know, linguistically, you might come to a cul-de-sac and come back and then you think, oh, what was I trying to say there? So if you keep it as simple as possible, then you will help yourself.
Now, if a conclusion is not made by Wednesday, then we will be facing a no-deal Brexit. But the national situation really mirrors the local one with the uncertainty between everything and the opposing sides between all the MPs. So you've got Steve Brine and Royston Smith, both Tory MPs, one for Winchester, one for Southampton, who are both Tories. Steve Brine is
See, there's some repetition there, but don't worry, we know what you're going to do, we're following you, and what you haven't done, and I've seen this in people before, literally just stop and freeze, and what you have done is just you've carried on going. Even though you may have just repeated what you've said, you've got a clear argument that you're going to go to now. So you carry on, you soldier through, and that's exactly what you've done here. And the next time you do it, you will remember that and be better for it.
Aina, who says that he will challenge the government for a deal which works for his constituents and is looking for a deal that works best for the UK. And Royston Smith says that he will not go back on the Brexit vote.
Just one little technique there, that you've looked down, and as you start saying it, you've just looked up at us, and that is really grown up. Rather than, oh my God, I've just got to read what is in front of me. What you've done is try to engage the viewer by just looking up, a little bit of eye contact. Clearly, you'll make that longer in time, but that's a really mature thing to do, to be aware of the camera that is there and looking at you.
He hopes to find a solution that everyone can accept.
Again, you've done it again. That's really, really good.
And then you have Alan Whitehead, a Labour leaver, who said that there should have been clearer conditions in the bill before it was presented to Parliament, and called it an insult to the House. And that really reflects on what's happening today. But all eyes will be on Brexit over the next few days. Back to you in the studio.
Well done. I think that's so tough, and the fact that you've got through it, I just think you've done really well. You look good on camera. You look so composed. I'm sure you were nervous as hell doing that, but actually what you've done is said with some authority and clarity what the three MPs in the area have said and how it differs. I think you should be praised for that. That's really well done.
Thanks, Renee. Now, Southampton has recently been rated as the third best place to live in the UK. The statistics from Southampton City Council suggest that hate crime is on the rise. Paige Lampard reports.
I quite like this. The juxtaposition of those two sentences is a very Winchester News Online type of thing. It's like, well, hang on, we used to be always voted to the top of this, but how come Southampton's got to number 3, is the third best place to live? But what we're going to do is we're going to smash it down by saying actually hate crime is on the up. So it's slightly disparaging to Southampton, obviously, because that's what it's about, and I see you try to link it in. It's just as a juxtaposition, it sounds a little bit strange, if you see what I mean, because this is a Winchester-based news bulletin.
Southampton has been rated the third best place to live in the UK.
Now, Paige, did we not hear that in the link?
But this comes as the city faces a 30% rise in hate crime since 2015.
Well, we have heard that the hate crime is on the rise. So basically, what I'm saying is, you've repeated what is in the link. You, as a reporter, have the chance now of saying something completely different. Or what you have to do is make sure the link doesn't say what you want to say. So you start the package in the way you want it and you write a different link. Otherwise, we have repetition. This, though, is good graphics. You see how much more interesting it is? And we see when Joe does his Sugar Awareness Week, you've got moving pictures behind. So it just makes it more interesting, rather than the slightly dull one we had, Sam, which was black with these. But if you don't know how to do it, we'll get someone to tell you, and you'll make this happen.
According to Southampton City Council, almost 600 incidents were reported last year, and almost 80% of them were race-related.
So I remember being
nice for just trying to get a different style of graphic in there, so well done.
This gentleman's stall saying, "Hi, I'm your local councillor, is there any local issues I can help you with?" And this guy was just kind of completely quiet, so I was like, "Any issues, sir, I can help with?" And he suddenly didn't say anything, but suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed mine and pointed at my skin and said, "Yes, that is my issue."
But the high numbers mean more people are speaking out against hate crime.
Was there any natural sound underneath that? I can't hear it. We need it. Just the noise of a street.
A cause for concern. I also think is a cause for optimism, because people are coming up and speaking out about what they're seeing, and that gives us an opportunity to deal with it.
I really like the way this is framed. It's actually really quite tight, but it works. It works really, really well. So for that, well done.
Paige Lampard, Winchester News Online.
But that bit, where's your story gone? What is this story really, really about? If it's about the link that Southampton's the third best place in the country to live, then what are the good bits of Southampton? If it's therefore about hate crime, then what's the element of that? We've got to have the pictures to try and contrast the two. So I'm not sure this story actually goes anywhere. I like the fact that you've got a couple of good interviews in, and they're really strong interviews, and the council has clearly played ball with us, which I like. You've thought about how you shoot this, but I think you need, even in shots like this, what are the hate crime? Is it a racism one? Is it sexism in against LGBT? Whatever it might be. So even in your low-level shots, we need to see more different colours of people, basically. So if it's Asian people, if it's black people, if it's white people, whatever it might be, we need more representation of that. I know in your opening shot, I think there was a shot of a black man in there, but it needs that variation to represent the story. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure that story goes anywhere. You've sort of dragged a couple of ideas together, and I'm not sure if it quite works.
With Sugar Awareness Week upon us, Winol have taken a look at statistics released by the NHS concerning childhood obesity in Hampshire.
One thing about these awareness weeks or days or whatever they might be, they usually put out by people who've got an agenda, mostly commercial marketing. People want to sell you something, you know, whether it's Black Friday, whatever it is, it's Heart Awareness Week, whatever it might be, but often charities as well. Is this an NHS one? When we do it, we need to find an angle that goes with it, because just saying it's Sugar Awareness Week is not enough. We need to find an angle to go with it, otherwise we are just taking a press release and putting it to air effectively. So find an editorial line that goes with it.
So let's go to Joe Shaw, who's here to help us break down the numbers.
And I need more explanation before Joe goes into anything. Otherwise we've just said, oh, it's Sugar Awareness Week, here's a story. And that isn't really fit for a bulletin.
Joe? Thanks, Johnny. So here are some of the key statistics. Winchester...
Just one thing, also, Joe, before you do that, just in this, when you're in the studio, and it's not necessarily, it's not your fault, but you'll just work on it.
Thanks,
Look
Johnny.
at this. Bob, you've just gone into a bit of shadow. Actually, where you were before, you were lit better. There. See? So that's where you want to stand. And as a presenter in a studio, feel that on your face. If you've got that bright light, you know you're in the right place. If you don't have it,
some of the key statistics.
There. You just moved a tiny little bit and you're not quite in the light. Simple device.
Winchester's reception and Year 6 students are both healthier than the county's average. Local Year 6 students are over 10...
Right, I'm trying to work out, there's a lot of figures going on here. And I like the fact that you've got a bar graph. I'm just not quite sure what's going on.
% lighter than the county's average. Now these statistics are typical of wealthy areas, where reception students are nearly 7% less likely to be obese, and Year 6 students are a whopping 15% less likely to be obese than in more deprived areas. In Southampton, for every 100,000 people admitted to the NHS, obesity was a factor in over 2,500 of them. Now, the tool for measuring obesity in the study...
What does that relate to? I mean, I know you've done Southampton, which we've given a kicking to. Is 2,500 per 100,000, is that a lot or a little? I don't know.
Body mass index, which uses height and weight to measure body fat. The BMI has its criticisms. The NHS has previously stated that the use of BMI may drastically underestimate the size of the childhood obesity epidemic. That's all from me.
If you don't put context in it, we don't have meaning. It's sort of a bit of hermeneutical here, that you need to put everything in context to be able to understand what a story is about and what you are saying, what a sentence, what your words, what your figures actually mean. So put it in context, and then we understand. Again, as a device, and Joe, you've delivered it really, really well. You've thought about it. I like the pictures behind. Sometimes a little, maybe a bit too much, but the idea is good. I just think you've got to put things into context so you give it meaning. Otherwise, I as a viewer go, well, 2,500 out of 100,000 in Southampton are obese. What does that mean? How, in context, is that good or bad? So with all these figures, they've got to be put in context.
Thanks, Joe. Now, as a new leisure centre has been given the go-ahead, the public have many ideas on what should replace the current site at River Park. James Poindexter reports.
I mean, maybe a little bit of history. This one's gone on for quite a long time, Johnny. So I think you may want to say, you know, X has been suggested. 1 year it was this, but then go into your link and link to James.
As Bahrain takes the site of a new leisure centre, River Park could end up being transformed into a new building. There has been growing support for a new arts venue to be built in the city, and River Park could be the prime location. Members of the public have had many different views on what they think should replace the leisure centre.
Yeah, does it work? Starting talking about Bar End and then you're talking about River Park, it's just a little bit confusing. Why are we starting with something else before we're talking about what we want to talk about, i.e. River Park?
Well, somebody was suggesting
I know you're saying it's a suggestion that, you know, it's a leisure centre and we've got bowling and whatever, but what are we going to put at River Park? But let's go to River Park first. That is the issue. It's gone on for a very long time and we've done lots of stories on this, but what is it editorially that it's all about?
That's to do with a bigger theatre in Winchester, so something more on the social side of that. Yeah, perhaps a bit of competition for the Everyman Theatre.
Clearly it's very, very windy. Get your microphone up, do a tighter shot and get your mic in nearer here.
Cinema, yeah, might be a good idea, or choice, but I like the open ground here. It'd be very sad to see all of that go.
Probably something.
Sort of, look at that shot before. It's just, if we start talking about pictures, okay, it just does.
But I like the open ground here.
Look,
It'd be very sad
bit
to
of
see
wobble. What's it doing? Goes up, goes down a bit. Either make it a static or actually do something with your pictures.
Well, they've got an EC with the
same issue with the sound
centre. They've actually got something that's, you know, people can go there, get some food, you know, the Nando's and those sorts of things, go bowling, all of that. But I don't know. I suppose flats will do.
I like the sports.
Well done for going left, right, left on your Vox Pops.
That's maintained here, whatever happens, because otherwise we're going to lose a lot of open air leisure space.
These are a bit dark, and the ones, there's the wide shots of the River Park, probably all shot at the same time, I don't know, but that's really dark. You haven't balanced that right.
But I would quite like to see a cultural centre of some sort of arts centre, small theatre, that sort of thing.
Although plans for the new leisure centre at Bahrain have been approved.
This is a little bit soft as well, James, because I think you're soft and this looks like in focus. I don't think that's a compression. I just think you've probably got a balance and it's on automatic when, if you did it yourself, and then it picks up that as the focus and then you move into it and it hasn't actually readjusted.
So would like to keep an open mind about what happens to River Park. The public have expressed what they think should replace the River Park Leisure Centre.
Again, if that's a bit of a stutter, do it again. Okay, just do the whole piece to camera again.
But ultimately, it's down to the council's decision. Whether they take in the public's opinions is up to them. James Poindexter, Winchester News Online.
And I think, James, maybe there is a bit of confusion with, look, you know, Bahrain's got a new centre, what's going to go there? I can see you've tried to bring it in to add context, which we're talking about, but I think you've got to start with the River Park idea and then bring in the rest of the city. Why have this when you've just got a new one at Bahrain? Why have this when you've got the Winchester Theatre Royal? So, you know, why put a theatre in there? We've got Winchester Theatre Royal or whatever. Why have this? Because we've already got that. That's the way I think you need to do it, to structure a little bit better, and then you'll get more relevance and context into it. And, you know, River Park, where's the council? What are they planning to do? Because it seems to be on the agenda for a very long time. And there are campaign groups to keep it green. So lots of people you can talk to here.
And finally, Winchester Film Festival returned to the city for another year, showcasing films sent in from around the world. We sent our reporter, Natalie Jaksakova, along to see if any of them made the cut.
Like it, smile, good, you know, decent link. We know what's happening.
Winchester Film Festival has returned for another year of award-winning short and feature-length films. They've held multiple screenings, including one here at the Discovery Centre.
When you say here, Natalie, bear in mind that we haven't seen it and we don't know that you're at the Discovery Centre.
As a filmmaker, I think that in order to meet other filmmakers, film festival is just like an open door to do it. and there is no better way than to volunteer in one.
I think when you've used these as editing bits, parts of the film, I think they need to be longer. I think as she is the only interview here, which is a bit disappointing because we want filmmakers, we want people's reaction to it, we want a lot more than just this lady. And when you cover it, I want to see more of the film rather than a lot of her.
And actually get the intro, like get it from the kitchen itself. But I think what is interesting about our festival is our relationship with filmmakers. We always want to take care of them as much as we can.
This year's lineup.
Nice, just to have a little bit of voice as you did it there, and then your voiceover starts. That's good technique.
Whose international films, and some confront challenging issues.
But then it all goes mute. I don't hear anything, and all I'm hearing is the tap tap of something. I think it's your microphone.
My favourite film was actually my feature film. So it was the feature film that was on the opening night on Saturday. It was Carga from Portugal. The director came down, we opened the whole festival with her.
See, it would have been nice to be there for that, you see. When you talk to that director, or you certainly get, that is when your story really counts rather than going down there afterwards. And it's sort of, a bit after the Lord Mayor's show.
Fun because it was about the human trafficking. I haven't realised actually how big of a problem it is.
With almost all the screenings having sold out and films from over 50 countries being shown, the festival has proved to be a big success. Natalie...
What happened to your natural sound there? That's gone. It's like you run out of it. Well, you haven't run out of it because you just re-loop it round, but it's gone quiet and we've got this banging again.
Cover, Winchester News Online.
So there are elements of that are good, but I think we need to see a bit more of the films, and rather than having your cutaways as just a short 2 seconds of whatever the film is. I think you need length, and you need to talk to some of the filmmakers themselves. What do they get out of going to Winchester Film Festival? How important is it? What do the people who go there want to see? The new films, but how are they involved in it? That makes it, rather than just a one-person interview and a few shots of some of the films. So that's the way you make it better. And I can just say before I finish, Johnny, I thought your reading was excellent, really, really good. One of the best pieces of presentation we have had. You carry on like this, I'm going to get worried. It is a very, very comfortable in the studio. You've got a very good voice, a very good way about you, and if you wanted to, I could see a career as a presenter. You look very, very good and mature in the studio, so really well done. So work on these ideas. I love the pace that Joseph brought in and the lots of different angles, voices, pictures. That's what we should be aspiring to. Think about those pictures, think about who we're going to talk to, and yes, just think about the structure of your packages and putting your narrative into context so that people understand. But really coming on well. So well done, everybody. It's been really good to watch this one, and I look forward to seeing you next one.